15 Bill. I was standing in the dark little street made darker by the setting sun hidden behind the dingy great buildings. I look around, time has slipped away from me again. I couldn't remember the exact moment I decided to bail on dinner and decided to follow an address on the business card. But here I was, and so I must have. I double-checked the card in my hand and looked up at the address in front of me. This is where the Gen headquarters was supposed to be. But I was looking at the empty storefront with the dusty windows. I looked around. I was starting to feel worried, a little fearful. Was this really the place? Maybe I should head back to the hotel, actually join my father and those men for dinner, like I told Brand I was doing. But no, I just couldn't stomach that. I knocked it inwardly. After waiting a few moments, I knocked harder, and then finally I grabbed the doorknob just as the door itself was flung open. My arm practically dislocated itself from my shoulder, eyes stumbled forward, falling onto the ground. Looky, is the film projector kid, Mr. Fusebox. Scott was looking down at the protruded body with a smirk of his face. Bad timing? I said, standing and brushing the dirt off my front. I'll say it's the perfect timing myself. That's the platform worthy of the Buster Keaton. Well then, good. I aim to make a positive first impression, I replied it. I stepped back into the street, letting Scott out of the building and watching as he locked it up shop. I hate to break it to you, kid, but this is your third impression, he said. Right. I was not usually at a loss for words, especially not in the business context. But right then I felt very, silly and very awkward. So, what can I do for you? He asked it. I would like to take you up on your offer. I like to learn. I will do that for free. I don't need the money. I just feel stupid to say the moment I said it. I feel like bragging I hadn't meant to do. I wanted to sound charitable, like Brand had suggested it. Instead, I just sounded smug. Well, I told you, the boss would be thrilled. You got the skills, kid. And also, free it is. Well, free is pretty fantastic. Can't do better than that. Unless I pay you, I joked it. Scott looked for a moment, suddenly liked the idea, hammered it. Shoot, what did I say that? Just don't tell my father. He believes the hard work should be awarded properly and fairly. He doesn't always understand that it can be mean more than just money. Scott nodded. Of course. Not sure when I'll be having this intimate chat with your dad, but I'll make sure not to tell him that. Thank you. Still feeling awkward. So, do I get the job? Let's see. We'll agree you'll work for nothing, and you're talented and motivated, I guess. Sure. We could give it a shot. He grinned. How about you come with me and meet the boss? Great. Perfect. I love that. I soon changed my mind as we speed through the city streets in the man's truck, the sign painted with the large letters, Gent. It was as if I thought he was on the same racetrack, taking corners at the speeds that made my stomach turn. I felt fairly certain his old clunker will fall apart on the next pothole, or at least I'll lose some of my teeth from knocking together when we did. Where are we going? I thought I knew Atlantic City well, but this insane driving had completely drove me. Fantastic, Jay's bar. It's called a Giant Dive, replied Scott, wrenching the wheel, spinning almost 180 degrees. In order to take a very normal right turn, I feel squeamish. I never heard of that one, I said. It was on the north side, he replied it. Oh, I didn't say anything else. I worried if I did, I might throw up. You okay with that? He asked it, looking at me. Please stop looking at me, looking at the road. A young woman with her child was crossing the street in front of us. Oh, that was right out of the film, of course, I said. Because if that makes you uncomfortable. Well, it made me comfortable. Oh, dear God. Scott looked back at the road casually, circled around the woman, and gave her a friendly wave. Well, okay then, you'll love the bus, just so you know. He'd be a bit quite prickly. Been dealing with a lot of stuff in New York, he said. New York? I asked it. Got fired, got his job back, didn't want it back. It was a whole thing. He might tell you about it or not. Just let them talk or let him be. Just let him take the lead, I understand. Most bosses like that. The rest of the ride was mercifully quiet as Scott raced the streets to the north side. I held fast to my underside of the seat and tried to breathe my way through the experience. When we finally stood and I was able to peel my way out of the truck, I almost kneeled that I meant to kiss the ground. This way, said Scott, completely unaware of the ordeal. He'll pull me through, or the opposite. I couldn't tell. I joined him as we walked along the busy streets to a small club with a bright morgue out in the front. We made our way inside. The club was small and dark. Just the effect was cozy, intimidated, but not diggy. The footlights uplit the small stage at the far end, where the jazz trio was playing, and each table had a candle flickering away on it. This place was very casual, quite the opposite of my father's club. It was also both men and women, which was, I thought, much nicer. I followed Scott to the table in the back corner, and the curved dark red upstated banquet on one side. Sitting there was a large, remarkable-looking man, a scowl on his face. Oh, how I hoped this was some bodyguard, not the boss himself. "Hey there, boss," said Scott, sitting in beside the large man. "Wonderful. This is the kid I was telling you about." I quickly took off my hat and held out my hand. "Hi, I'm Bill Chambers." The man looked at me for a moment to look at Scott, then looked back at me. Then slowly, with an obvious stance, he reached out and shook my hand. "Thomas Connor," he said. "Well, Mr. Connor, I'm really excited about this opportunity. It seems to me that Jen is doing some truly motivated things." Mr. Connor stared at me and then once again looked at Scott. "What do you tell him?" Scott raised his hands and laughed. "Hey now, nothing. Just we were happy to hire someone to work for us for free." "For free?" "Yes." Mr. Connor looked at me again, then suddenly felt the urge to run away, but just to leave the club, hop into Scott's truck and drive it all the way home. "Why you want to work for free?" "I'm rich." I said just like that, in the way I might have been when I was around 7 years old, and learned the differences between me and the most people. Mr. Connor stared at me, then shook his head. "Sit down already," I said quickly. On the other side of him on the banquet, felt oddly intimidated, all the three of us sitting curved like this, next to one another. I tried to sit as close to the edge as possible, and the waitress arrived then. "Can I get you fellas something to drink?" "I'll have a whiskey sour," said Scott. The waitress looked at me. "Just a soda, thanks." She left, and there was a long pause. I would say it was silent, except it wasn't. The band was playing something bright and cheerful. The customers at the other tables were loud and raucous. It was like a lively scene, except in the dark corner. In this dark corner, things were uncomfortable. "Did everything go well last night?" Scott asked Mr. Connor then. Mr. Connor nodded, "As well as could be expected." "I can't believe you did that, after everything that man did to you." Now, Scott." The waitress returned with our drinks, and I was grateful to have something to accompany myself during this, the world's most awkward job interview. "I just find it strange," said Scott, sipping his drink. "The man has responsibilities. Even after everything, it was a good thing. It was the right thing to do, just to get out of there. I think you could have sunk that ship, just to send it all to the bottom of the ocean. And you know what will happen then, do you? You know how the ink in the sea water would have." He stopped it. I was remembered it. Mr. Connor turned to me. "You like to fix things?" It was all sudden. I just nodded. "Well, kid, you better be as good as Scott says you are. There are a lot of things that need fixing out there." "Is that a metaphor?" I asked it. "No." "Right. Except I was pretty certain it was. What on earth were they discussing? Captured my imagination. That was for sure. It struck me a chord in my gut, and I felt, well, a little frightened, but very invigorated. "So get the job?" I asked it. Mr. Connor nodded. "Why not?" Then he laughed to himself. "Sure, why not?"